U.S. President Barack Obama heads for his first major tour of Africa this week, starting in Senegal tonight. Now, Washington is keen to cozy up to Senegal, a country it has praised as a solid and emerging democracy. Now, last year, Senegal's election, which saw Macky Sall unseat Abdoulaye Wade as president after 12 years in power, was seen as an example of Senegal's good governance. President Obama was impressed and said as much when Sall and 3 other African leaders traveled to Washington in March of this year. Sall then won more praise when the authorities went after Karim Wade, son of the outgoing President Abdoulaye Wade, and charged him with a series of fraud totaling some €1 billion. Like his predecessor George Bush in 2003, President Obama is set for a symbolic visit to Gorée Island off Dakar, a key port in trade of slaves between Africa and the Americas. He will then travel to South Africa before wrapping up that trip in Tanzania.
What he is doing is highlighting 3 countries in 3 different regions of the world, Anglophone and Francophone, in East Africa, in Southern Africa, and in West Africa. Countries that are committed to democracy.
While Tanzania will be playing host to a global leader twice in recent months, U.S. President Barack Obama is expected to visit the country Monday. Obama's visit to Tanzania follows in the wake of Chinese President Xi Jinping's trip to the East African country as soon as he assumed office in March of this year. CCTV's Jen Keo is in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, where she sought to get answers on why Tanzania.
It may not be the largest or strongest economically, but strategically Tanzania appears to be emerging as a battleground and a darling of both the East and the West. 3 months ago, Dar es Salaam was the second stop in Chinese President Xi Jinping's maiden foreign tour. It will be U.S. President Barack Obama's last stop in his 3-nation African tour.
It's not a coincidence.
Dr. Benson Bana is a political science lecturer at the University of Dar es Salaam. He's among those who believe that the tour has more to do with the 2 countries' long-standing relations, especially on foreign policy.
We have been instrumental in at least pursuing a policy, a foreign policy, that is reconciliatory, that puts the human dignity in front of anything else, and a foreign policy that also aims at attracting investors into this country.
And while the U.S. remains Tanzania's largest single development partner, there's no doubt about China's soaring influence in the country, a reason some analysts believe is behind Obama's visit. During President Xi's visit, deals worth $800 million were signed that will see, among others, the construction of a new port in Bagamoyo. President Obama will be accompanied by 800 business executives in a trip the White House says will focus on economic cooperation and strengthening democracy.
Tanzania is not expecting much out of Obama's visit.
While there may not be much, there must be something, at least going by the past trips to Tanzania by sitting U.S. presidents. Bill Clinton is associated with AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, the legislation that provides eligible countries with duty-free access to America's markets for almost all products. George W. Bush, who visited Tanzania in 2008, is credited with a Millennium Challenge account that provides economic assistance to improve roads and infrastructure. Now, whichever way you look at it, these presidential visits are by far the clearest sign of good relations and engagement between countries. Now, Tanzania seems to be getting that by being courted by the world superpowers. Now, whether it's all about what it has, resources or not, Tanzania is savoring the experience. Jen Keo, CCTV, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
And despite Nelson Mandela's critical health condition, South Africa's foreign ministry is saying that U.S. President Barack Obama will be flying in at the end of the week.
Well, if there was any doubt as to whether US President Barack Obama's visit was going to be able to go ahead, given Mr. Mandela's ongoing health conditions, well, the flags are now flying over the president's office here in Pretoria, in the capital. And that's in line with the comments from the South African Foreign Minister on Tuesday saying that Mr. Obama's tour here will go ahead. Now, as was the case back in 2012 when then US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton visited, the key focus is going to be trade after the United States has spent more than a few years, really focusing more on getting its own house in order. South Africa, as the continent's biggest economy, then has to be a key priority for the Obama administration. But don't forget, there are diplomatic ties to mend as well. South Africa voted in favour of that no-fly zone over Libya, only then to react furiously at what it saw as regime change by Western countries. And that spat alone really exemplifies the constant balancing act that South Africa has to play as it tries to assert itself as a regional leader, as a spokesman for the continent to the world, and also as a leading voice for the developing world as part of BRICS. So one of the key questions on the eve of what is the first presidential visit since 2003 could well be whether it can be all of those things or whether it's going to have to choose. Guy Henderson, CCTV, Pretoria.
And staying on that story, Kenya appears to have returned a favor to the US government, and with a tit-for-tat reaction, two renowned high-profile business executives have declined an invitation to meet the US president in neighboring Tanzania. President Obama, whose father was a Kenyan, snubbed the East African country over what the State Department described as democratic principles. Robert Nagila tells us more.
It's a trip billed as elevating American economic engagement with Africa. Beginning Wednesday, US President Barack Obama makes his first extended trip to Africa with scheduled stops in Senegal, Tanzania and South Africa. But curiously missing in his itinerary is the birthplace of his father, Kenya.
He is highlighting three countries in three different regions of the world, Anglophone and Francophone, in East Africa, in Southern Africa, and in West Africa. Countries that are committed to democracy.
Just before Kenyans went to the polls in March, a senior Obama administration official warned their choices would have consequences. Nevertheless, Kenyans went ahead and elected Uhuru Kenyatta as president, despite the fact that he had a charge of crimes against humanity hanging over his head by the International Criminal Court. Obama's snap to Kenya is seen as many as a consequence of that choice. But the decision to skip Kenya has not gone down well within business circles.
I felt we were slighted.
One of Kenya's wealthiest businessmen, Chris Kirubi, has snubbed an invitation by the US government to meet President Obama in neighboring Tanzania on Monday.
He's being very unfair to us. He's exposing investors to the Tanzanian economy and denying Kenyan economy. When they ask, I'm sure they ask, why are we not going to that great country, Kenya? Because Kenya is the center of East Africa. It's the one with the bigger GDP, it's the one with the bigger population, it's the most organized, and equally, it's the place where most American companies have made their headquarters.
Kirubi says it's unfair for the US government to connect the visit to the ongoing ICC trial, as the court has yet to reach a verdict.
The issue of ICC doesn't buy, I don't buy that.
And he's not the only one. Bob Collymore, CEO of East Africa's most profitable company, Safaricom, has also turned down the invite. And on the streets of Nairobi, Kenya's capital, Obama's snub received a mixed reaction.
Of course, I do care because it's very sad. This president is a son of this country. We feel he belongs here. It's very sad that he's not coming this side.
Yeah, the reason is that's another country. He's a president of another country. But for me to care about him not coming to Kenya, to not add any value, because you have a lot of problems here.
He has his reasons. American diplomacy prevents him from coming here.
For many in this East African powerhouse, Obama's snub has spared them endless traffic as a result of road closures and the jamming of mobile networks if the US president had come to town. Robert Nagila, CCTV, Nairobi.
Well, let's get more on President Obama's Africa tour from CCTV's Daniel Ranges in Washington, D.C. He's joining us live. Daniel, it would appear that Africa has not been high on the U.S. agenda over the last 4 years. Now, will President Obama be trying to restore that reputation with Africa, and how does he intend to do that exactly?
Well, absolutely. Even analysts here who are closely aligned with some of the major institutions have criticized President Obama's lack of attention onto Africa. And I think this does provide a significant opportunity for the president to demonstrate that he understands how important Africa is to the future of American businesses particularly. But also, I think there's an emphasis here in the administration on trying to show that they want to encourage democracy and not necessarily in some grandiose fashion, but in a practical way in terms of encouraging an independent judiciary, issues which create stronger institutions which can create the confidence for international businesses to come to invest. But I think fundamentally, President Obama is going to come to Africa making a pitch for the future of Africa. And I think it'd be important for him to make major addresses, as he is, to young audiences, universities, because the Americans recognize that the future of Africa rests with the growing population of young people, the growing proportion of young people, and aligned with the growth opportunities that exist in Africa. I think he's had a lot of strong pressure from the business community here to make that pitch, make that case for much more engagement between US businesses and African businesses, aligned with this notion that you can build institutions which create a future for Africans, not just as a way to sort of land grab African resources.
Daniel, he will be making a pitch for Africa though, but China has now overtaken the US as Africa's leading trade partner. Now, how does the US government though intend to restore its ties with Africa, considering countries like China, Brazil and India have made an impact on the continent?
Well, definitely there is a feeling here, even amongst those in the administration who've publicly said that they do believe that the White House has been behind the ball and that the American establishment has been behind the ball on the African growth story. And certainly I think there's a recognition that countries, emerging nations, and China, Brazil, Turkey, others have made a real play for Africa and have started to influence the game in a way, making the Americans look like they simply have lost touch with what's going on in Africa. So yes, this is a good opportunity. But of course, when it comes to American business parlance, one has to have a unique selling point. And what the administration, I think, is going to say is, we're interested in the future of Africa. We're interested in not only making money here, but building institutions that can ensure the success of African businesses themselves and also broaden the base of wealth. So this is a pitch for America. This is a big opportunity for American business, but it's also an opportunity to somehow try to differentiate America from some of the other players there.
All right, Daniel Branch is joining us there from Washington, D.C. Many thanks indeed for your insights. Well, do stay with us here on Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Emotion builds over Mandela as he is put on life support system. We bring you a comprehensive coverage from South Africa. Up next. South Africans have been going in their hundreds to offer notes, flowers and prayers for Nelson Mandela at a wall surrounding a Pretoria hospital where the 94-year-old anti-apartheid hero remains in a critical condition. Well wishers, messages, bouquets and stuffed animals have piled up at the guarded boundary around the compound where doctors are treating the former South African president for a recurrent lung infection. Well, our team in Johannesburg and across South Africa will be bringing us all the details of what's been happening in South Africa during the day in a short while. But the head of South Africa's traditional leaders has called for Nelson Mandela to be taken off life support if there is no chance of him recovering. Fatekile Holomisa says Mandela has been a great revolutionary, political leader and traditional leader as well. CCTV's Renee Delcam has that story.
It was another somber day in Nelson Mandela's home province as anxiety grew over his fate. There were unconfirmed reports that chiefs from the Mandela clan's Tembu tribe would fly out to visit Mandela in hospital. The 94-year-old, often referred to by his clan name of Madiba, has been in hospital for almost 3 weeks. And since the weekend, he's been in a critical condition. And the president of South Africa's Council of Traditional Leaders added his voice to the nation's concerns.
If Madiba is no longer enjoying life and is basically on life support systems and therefore is not appreciative of what is happening, I think the good Lord should take a decision to put him out of his suffering.
Chief Holomisa paid tribute to Mandela as a fellow traditional leader and member of the African National Congress.
It's going to be a painful loss because he is a pillar of strength, a moral leader who has been able to prevent a number of people who would have been otherwise mischievous from doing things that would embarrass Madiba. So he is the kind of leader that we would hope other leaders would want to emulate.
And despite the fact that Nelson Mandela is gravely ill and remains in a critical condition in hospital, people here in Qunu say they will not give up hope and will continue to pray for him. Renee Delcam, CCTV, Qunu.
Well, the Mandela story is also dominating social media. People worldwide have been going online to share their feelings and to show support. And to find out the latest, CCTV's Famida Miller has more.
A shrine to a stricken hero. The number of well-wishers coming here to the hospital in Pretoria has increased dramatically since news broke that Nelson Mandela's condition had deteriorated. And that news broke on social media. There's been a surge in traffic online spurred by Mandela's plight. Hashtags like Pray for Mandela, Madiba and Mandela have been trending on Twitter since he was hospitalized almost 3 weeks ago. And it's provided a constant flow of tributes and information, mostly coming from South Africa, the United States and Britain.
Well, the thing about social media, be it Twitter or Facebook or any of the others, is that it's instantly publishable. So people can say something and it's instantly available to anyone in the world. So there's definitely going to be a deluge of traffic, to use the technical term for it. There's going to be a lot of posting. You know, will these networks fall over? I don't know. I suppose we'll see when it happens.
It's not without its drawbacks. Numerous rumors have circulated on social media only to turn out untrue or at best premature.
Well, the problem is that because it's instantly available, if it's incorrect, it's instantly available as incorrect. The University of Witwatersrand unfortunately put out an obituary of Mandela before anything had happened.
Still, whichever way the story develops, the use of social media is likely to increase.
Well, around the world, the fragile health of the former South African President Nelson Mandela is also making the headlines. In Paris, an exhibition is taking a step back and looking at Mandela's extraordinary life journey and the impact he made on South Africa and the world. A CCTV's Kate Parkinson now reports.
Your voices carried across the water to inspire us in our prison, sir.
From political prisoner to South Africa's first black president and one of the most respected and beloved politicians in the world, it has been an extraordinary life journey for Nelson Mandela. This exhibition, produced by the Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg, provides a glimpse into that life, showing Mandela in all his various guises, examining his strengths and greatness, but also his self-acknowledged weaknesses too. For Laurent Clavel from the Institut Français, the exhibition resonates here in Paris as much as in South Africa or anywhere else.
And actually, you know, Nelson Mandela is an icon, is a world icon. He doesn't belong anymore to the only South African people. But as an icon, we know some specific images or words from him, and we don't know all his history, and we don't know the man himself. And this exhibition is talking about that.
Paris recently made Nelson Mandela an honorary citizen, and with record visitor numbers at the exhibition, it is clear people in France hold him close to their hearts.
For the young people, today is an encouragement. It is a model we have to follow, and especially it is to say to yourself that when you believe in something, when you are convinced, you need to fight until the end.
I believe he represents justice and the fight for equality for all. He represents so many things. It is a great tribute to do this kind of exhibition.
Mandela's health may be fading, but here in Paris, his legacy is very much alive. Nelson Mandela spent almost 3 decades in captivity. 18 years were spent in a cell, just like this. It's a bleak reminder of South Africa's apartheid regime, and just one chapter in the life of an extraordinary man. Kate Parkinson, CCTV, Paris.
While the health situation of Mr. Mandela is causing concern across the world, let's get some more insight from CCTV's Fameda Miller, who's joining us now from Johannesburg. Fameda.
Thanks very much, Beatrice. Now, as we've seen, South Africa spent another anxious day awaiting news on Nelson Mandela. The elderly statesman's been in hospital for almost 3 weeks now, and his condition still continues to be critical. Well, we're joined in studio by Nomboniso Gasa, a researcher on cultural and gender issues, as well as Tembiso Msomi, the political editor for the Sunday Times. Welcome to Africa Live. Nomboniso, I'm going to start with you. Now, the focus in recent hours, looking at developments over the last couple of weeks, is that focus has shifted to the movements of the elders of the Mandela family. What say do they have in terms of going forward? What is the role they play at this point?
Well, I mean, there are a number of roles that are played by elders in times like this. The first, of course, is that in the normal course of events, when an elderly person is ill, that the clan would gather, and that it would be expected that some of them would come and visit. And I think it's important to emphasize that this is not the first time that the Madiba elders are in fact visiting President Nelson Mandela when he's not well. I mean, in times when he has not been well. They have come up from Eastern Cape before. But most importantly, I think that this is a time when families try to gather together and try to figure out what is it that can be done or that is needed to ameliorate the pain of somebody who's suffering, particularly an elder. So the understanding would be that in a situation like this, where somebody the condition is not changing, and he's not passing on, and yet he's not recovering. So normally the clans would look at it and say, what is it that in this family, in this clan, may be causing dis-ease, and is there a way for us to make that dis-ease and distress that he may be feeling, to make it easier and perhaps relieve him.
You know, let's bring Stembiso in here at this point, looking at some of the movement, as you mentioned, by the elders of the Madiba clan and some of the activity we've seen at the hospital in Pretoria, as well as in Qunu, where Mr. Mandela is originally from. Has the media, do you think, to any extent overestimated what is happening because we aren't getting the right information, or we aren't privy to information from government?
I think the problem has largely been the fact that there isn't enough information coming out, and I think it's mostly because there is this tension that will exist between what the family will like to see in terms of Mr. Mandela's privacy, as well as the need by the public for all the information to come out. So government has had this duty of balancing the two needs. So as a result of that, there's been a lot of speculation. But I think on the whole, the South African media in general has been very, very, I mean, in the way they've handled this issue, they've really behaved very well. Considering that there isn't a lot of information out there. So now and again, there's a lot of speculation that comes, but I've seen with a lot of newsrooms that if that speculation comes, no one reports on it until it is confirmed. It's not like in December, because I think in December when Mr. Mandela was admitted to hospital, there was a lot of speculation and there were a lot of stories that were unconfirmed that were being run. So I think the behavior has been much better than we saw 6 months ago.
Now, Manisa, would you agree with this? Because we've had some information come out, not necessarily confirmed by officials in terms of Mr. Mandela's condition, details regarding his condition. Do you think the media has handled that well? Or do we have also international networks possibly saying things that South Africans aren't comfortable with and that perhaps don't sit well with cultural norms?
You know, it's interesting because there's a lot of myth-making around what is allowed in African cultural situations and what is not allowed. The first thing is that in many African cultural settings, people make peace with death as they make peace with birth. It's a very, very accepted thing that at some point, death will come, and it's embraced as part of a natural cycle of life. Now, one of the things that we find happening here is that, you know, President Mandela himself is an embodiment of different cultures, right? So that he doesn't occupy a space that is purely African in that kind of sense. So there are political sensitivities that get balanced and explained away as part of cultural norms. There are family sensitivities, which are normal in any family, which get balanced and explained as cultural norms. And then there are cultural norms, right? And the first thing that is important to note is that Mr. Mandela has never really lived from childhood, you know, to later days in his life. He's never really lived a life.
No, Manisa, unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut you off there. We've run out of time. We hope to continue this discussion another time. We're speaking there to Nomboniso Gasa. She is an analyst and researcher on gender and cultural issues, as well as Stembiso Msomi, the political editor at the Sunday Times. Beatrice, I'll hand back to you.
All right, Famida Miller there, bringing us up to speed with the latest from Mr. Mandela's health situation. Well, we'll take a short break now on Africa Live, but when we return,
sooner or later I will try to join the parliament, whatever, and at the same time, if I have a chance to become a president, why not?
From truck to politics, legend Gabriel Selassie sets his eyes on the presidency. Haile Gebrselassie is the undisputed world athletics champion, breaking records in the 10 and 5,000 meters and even named a man from another planet. Now, this long-distance runner is now aspiring to join the political scene and says in an exclusive interview with CCTV's Girum Chala that he wants to be the next president of Ethiopia. Prioritizing good governance, Haile Gebrselassie says he would like to see a more prosperous Ethiopia under his leadership.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I don't know when exactly. I'm thinking, can I do this in a good way? Like what I've achieved in athletics? Or, well, my experience actually is not an easy experience. I had a chance to learn a lot during my athletics career. I'm wondering if I can do, this politics. Of course, sooner or later, I will try to join in the parliament, whatever. And at the same time, if I have a chance, to become a president, why not?
Haile, as you might have understood, Ethiopia is a parliamentary state in which elections are happening for any individual or any party involved in it to be part of the parliament. But everything else will be decided, like being the president of the nation or a minister, after you become a member of the party. Are you planning to be any part of any party in Ethiopia, or you want to run for the parliament individually?
Believe me, I don't work with the party. I work alone, which means I run a parliamentary individually. And then, of course, our constitution, just it's a little bit good enough for individuals, like to become a president of Ethiopia. Maybe to become a prime minister of Ethiopia is another thing. You have to have your own party. To become a president, if you are in a party, you cannot be a president, no matter what. If you are an individual, well, of course. That's what I'm thinking. That's why I said to people, okay, let me go forward and to be a president or to be a parliamentary. First, of course, you have to be in a parliament. You have to run, individually. Now the next election is very soon. I'm thinking, the election, the one after 7 years. Well, if the things it's okay, I'll do the next election.